Association of Realtors that all MLSs throughout the country had to adopt. So it's not something that we personally are implementing. It's a nationwide rule. And basically what it says is that all new MLS mandatory listings have to be entered in the MLS within 1 business day of being marketed to the public. That was a change from our previous rule, which allowed for calendar days to enter a listing. Now, if you haven't started publicly marketing the listing yet, you do still have that 4-day window. So the main change was once you start marketing it, you now have to get it on within 1 business day. So let's talk about some of the definitions within that rule. Mandatory listings for our MLS, that would be property types of single family, condo, multifamily of 8 units and less, and lots and acreage listed for sale. Auction properties are optional, and our service area are all of the yellow shaded counties shown on the map here. So if you have a listing that falls within any of those counties, it would be considered a mandatory listing that would need to be entered in the MLS within 1 business day of being publicly marketed. If you have a listing that's outside of those counties, you're still welcome to enter them in the South Central Wisconsin MLS, but you're not required to. It becomes optional at that point. So the definition of a business day was taken right from the offer to purchase, and it is a calendar day other than Saturdays, Sundays, and any legal public holiday. So basically, you're looking at, your weekdays, so weekends don't count and holidays don't count. Public marketing. So public marketing includes, but is not limited to, flyers that are displayed of the property, your for sale yard signs, any kind of digital marketing on public-facing websites. So like your brokerage website displays, social media, even if it's like there's the Madison area realtors group on Facebook, because that's multi-brokerage, more than just your company can see that, that's also considered a public marketing site. Any kind of digital communications like email blasts and any applications that are visible to the general public. Those all fall under the category of public marketing. Now, there may be certain situations where you have a seller that really doesn't want their property to be marketed or advertised to the general public. If that's the case, you can do what's called an office exclusive listing. And the intent of an office exclusive listing is to protect the privacy of a seller who doesn't want a lot of people to know that their home is for sale. If you take an office exclusive listing, it can only be promoted to the brokers and agents that are associated with your company, and one-to-one promotion between those agents in your company and their existing buyer clients. Office exclusive listings can't be displayed or advertised to the general public or to any agents outside of the listing office. They also can't be advertised by or on behalf of the seller. So you'll just want to make sure you have that conversation with your seller up front so they're aware that they can't be sending out email blasts or putting it out on social media either. And you can't advertise the existence of an office exclusive listing to capture new buyers. So you can only market them to your existing buyer clients that you have under buyer agency. And there are a couple forms that are required to be sent to the MLS if you take an office exclusive listing. The listing contract and the MLS exclusion form need to be sent to our office within 4 calendar days of the list date. And I've got a link here so I can show you what that form looks like. Basically, it just needs to be completed and signed by your seller. There's a signature section at the bottom here, and it just kind of discusses what that means. So you and your seller kind of have a guide for a conversation of what an office exclusive listing entails to make sure everybody's on the same page. All right, so talking about some timeframes and status options for initial entry in the MLS. You can start marketing a listing as early as the list date. So that's going to be the first day of the term of your contract, and that on the residential listing contract is going to be line 311. So as far as the time frame to enter on the MLS, as we talked about, it kind of depends on whether you've started publicly marketing the property or not. So let's say you list the property, you put a sign in the yard, that would be classified as public marketing. So you'd need to get it on the MLS within 1 business day. So let's say you take the listing on a Friday, you put the sign in the yard on Friday, you would have until Monday to get it on the MLS, the end of the day Monday. That would be your 1 business day time frame. If you take the listing on Monday, start marketing it Monday, you would have to make sure it's on the MLS by the end of the day Tuesday. If you're not publicly marketing it at all, no sign, you're not putting it out on social media, you're basically just sharing it with other agents in your office, or your existing buyers, you do still have that 4 calendar day window in which to enter the listing on the MLS. And in either case, if it's entered late, there is a pretty hefty fine for that. It's $100 per day for each day late that it's entered. So just kind of keep that in mind when you're thinking about when to start your listing contracts, when you're starting to market them, so you don't run up against those deadlines. So there are a few different status options for initial entry. If the property is ready to market and show, you can enter it in active status. If it's ready to market, but maybe the seller wants to do some work around the property, maybe they're not quite yet ready to show it, but they want it to start getting that exposure to the public, you can enter it as active status with the show date in the first line of the public remarks. So it'll still be sent out to all the internet sites and buyer searches, but that disclosure in the public remarks lets everybody know when showings will actually begin. If your seller is not yet ready to fully market the property on the MLS and all the internet sites or show it, then you can enter the listing in delayed status. And we'll talk a little bit about the differences between these statuses in the next slide. So basically the no showings piece is what's going to determine which status you're going to enter a new listing in. No showings means no showings for anybody. So that includes buyers who are working with the listing agent. There are pretty hefty fines that could be levied if a violation of this rule occurs. I think up to $15,000 is what the handbook says. So just be sure to keep that in mind if you have a listing that's either in delayed status or active with no showings. Just be sure absolutely nobody is showing that property. If you have a no showing stipulation, agents from the listing company can preview the home, but they can't take any buyers through. So the reason for this exception is to give the listing broker and maybe agents who work on a team the ability to go in and do staging suggestions, talk about pricing strategy. So any agent from the listing company can go in just to kind of facilitate that and allow access to those agents. So if you're entering a listing in active status with no showings, you do have to put the show date in the first line of the public remarks. You can also optionally enter the show date in that separate show date field. That will block off the showing time calendar until that date. So if an agent clicks on that schedule a showing button within the MLS, they actually won't be able to click to schedule a showing until the date that showings begin. Days on market does count when it's in active status. And the listing is also sent out to all the public websites and included in auto email and collab center searches and notifications to buyers. For that reason, all required fields do have to be completed, and at least one front exterior photo of the property is required. Now, if you're entering the listing in delayed status, it's probably because you're not quite ready to start mass marketing it or fully marketing it to the public yet. The show date for delayed status is required in the show date field. Although because of the situation surrounding COVID, it's temporarily optional. In the case where you have a seller who, maybe has some uncertainty about when they'll be ready to allow showings, you can leave that date blank for the time being, but typically that is required when you're entering a listing in delayed status. Days on market do not accumulate while a listing is delayed. So if you enter a new listing and you want to make sure that days on market count shows as 0, just be sure you enter it in delayed status on the list date. If you wait until the next day, it'll show with a days on market count of 1. Delayed listings are not sent out to public websites or in auto email or collab center search notifications to buyers. With that being said, you are able to individually email listings that are in delayed status out to a buyer. The expectation is that you will just have the conversation with them about what delayed status means and that the property is not yet available to be seen. Missing fields and photos are okay while it's delayed. You'll just want to be sure you enter and verify all information before changing the listing to active status. The only fields that are required in delayed status are a valid address and a bona fide list price. You are going to have to enter something in all of the required fields in order to get the listing to save. But for example, if you don't have the room dimensions yet, you can put in a filler of like 0 by 0. When a new listing hits the market monitor in delayed status, it actually shows up twice. Once when it's first entered in delayed, and it hits again as a new listing when it goes to active status. Delayed status is only available on initial entry. So if you move a delayed listing to active status, it can't go back to delayed. So just be sure when you move it to active, you're ready for it to stay active at that point. And typically there's a 45-day limit to how long a listing can remain in delayed status, although this can be extended with a written request from the seller. That's something as simple as, if you have the seller email you and just say, hey, we're not quite ready to allow showings. I know we're coming up on our 45-day limit, but we're actually going to need to extend it for another couple weeks, 2 weeks, months, whatever the time frame may be. That's not a problem. Just forward that email to MLS staff and we can issue an extension up to another 45 days. With that being said, that also has been temporarily relaxed due to COVID, just to give people a little bit more flexibility when trying to navigate all of the uncertainty. So some requirements to consider for your new listing. We want to make sure the data is accurate. Now, most of the time, you are going to get an email from either Kelly or myself if we find some kind of a discrepancy in the data, or if another agent or appraiser notifies us that something doesn't seem quite right. We'll email you, let you know what seems to be the issue, and give you a chance to correct it before we issue any kind of a fine. But if you ignore us or don't correct it, or don't, at least respond to us and let us know you're working on it, the potential for a $5 per day fine is there. So just kind of keep that in mind. There is a nice tool within Paragon, some of you may be familiar with, called the correction button. So I'll just pop over here quick and show you what that looks like on a listing. I'm just going to pull up a random listing here so I can show you. So it's this button right here in the toolbar that says correction. So if you notice something doesn't seem quite right with a listing, maybe they have rooms listed in the lower level, but below grade square footage is showing as 0. Just hit that correction button and you can type your message in right here. This goes directly to MLS staff. So it never goes to the listing agent. They won't know it's you who reported the issue. It'll come to either Kelly or myself. We'll take a look at it, and we will contact the listing agent if there does appear to be a discrepancy and ask for some clarification on that. We never share the names of any reports, so it'll be handled confidentially. So you can feel comfortable using that button without having to worry about anybody knowing it was you other than MLS staff. Contact info. So there's no contact info allowed on any public-facing sections of a listing. So this would be things like agent names, team names, company names, logos, email addresses, phone numbers, websites, things like that. What we consider the public-facing fields are photos, photo labels, photo watermarks, public virtual or video tours, public remarks, directions, and public documents. So just be sure not to have any contact info in those sections. Talking about square footage next, I've got a link here to our square footage guide. I'm just going to click into it so you can kind of see what it looks like. So we talk about the difference between above grade square footage and below grade square footage, and I'll go over that in just a second. And then also what you need to consider a space finished square footage, which I'll also go over. So this is kind of just a summary of all that information. Oops, I'll click happy here. So in order to be counted as finished, we look at 4 components. The space must have heat, finished walls, finished ceiling, and a finished floor. Now, if one of those 4 components is missing, let's say, you know, it's heated and it's got finished walls and a finished floor, but the ceiling is exposed, maybe it's just floor joists in a lower level that's otherwise finished, you can still include that space in the finished square footage total and in the room dimensions area. But you do need to disclose the missing component in the public remarks, just so buyers and other agents are aware that, you know, that would need to be completed. And then above grade versus below grade. This is something that, especially in properties that have like a walkout lower level, we see some confusion with sometimes. So I like to just bring up this little graphic to kind of show what should be considered above grade and what should be considered below grade. So it goes by level. So any level has to be fully above ground level in order to be classified as above grade. Most of the time it's pretty obvious if it's a, you know, like a ranch home with a lower level that's finished, basement, that should be classified as below grade because it's fully below ground level, that whole level is. When you have an exposed lower level where it's either partially below grade, partially above grade, or maybe one of the sides is completely exposed and has a walkout, if any part of that level is below grade, so any of the exterior walls, that whole level has to be classified as below grade. And that's pretty standard for the industry. Appraisers, assessors, Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae all kind of go by the same guidelines. So that's something just to kind of keep in mind to make the information as consistent, as accurate as possible. All right, so photos. As I mentioned, at least one photo of the front exterior of the home is required. Now, it doesn't have to be the first photo, it can be anywhere in the order, but that is the one requirement as far as photos go. We do allow up to 36. You have 7 days from the list date to make sure that front exterior photo is uploaded. If one's not uploaded by day 8, we'll reach out to you with an email reminder that, you know, that needs to be added, and usually give you a few extra days to do that. And if it's still not added, then the MLS has to send our photographer out. So we will charge a $50 fee if we get to that point. But we'll always give you a reminder before we issue that fine. There is an exception for vacant land, commercial property, and property that's under construction. A photo is not required on those. The front exterior photo rule also applies to sold comps. So just be sure you have a photo entered within 7 days from the input date when you enter a sold count. And be sure you have the right to use the photos. If you take them yourself, obviously you know you have copyright permission to use those. But if the seller provides the photos to you, you'll want to make sure you know where they came from. If the seller took them, or if they got them from the previous listing, if they had it on the market before. If you've gotten permission from that previous listing agent to use the photos, we recommend getting that permission in writing, just so you have something to point to if a question were to arise. We also want to make sure the photos are presenting a true picture of the property. So any kind of photo enhancements should be disclosed on the photo itself. Now, this wouldn't necessarily be for like virtual staging, as long as it's you know, just furniture or, you know, maybe like a picture on the wall, something that the buyer is not going to expect would come with the property anyway. But if you're changing things like the color of the paint on the walls or, you know, the finish, the floor, just be sure you disclose that on the photo so that there aren't any surprises when the buyer gets to the property. If you have photos of a body of water, it has to be taken while standing on the property or the deeded access. So if you know your home is 2 blocks away from Lake Monona and you can't actually see the lake from the property, just be sure you're not including that photo of the lake. Associated documents are required for specific types of properties. So auction properties, farm type properties, and limited service listings all have a document that's required to be uploaded to the listing. The link here will take you out to where you can find those documents. It's kind of in the same spot as where we keep our profile sheets, and you'll see down below the different documents. Auction properties, limited service listings, and farm documents can all be found here. So just be sure you have that uploaded at the time you make the listing live. Other documents like the condition report, maps, flood-based paint disclosures are helpful to include, but they're not required by the MLS. You've got 2 options when you're adding a document to a listing. You can leave there's a little checkbox. You can leave it unchecked, which means the document will be private and only visible to other South Central Wisconsin MLS agents. If you'd like the document to be visible to the general public and to agents outside of our MLS through Wirex, then you will want to check the box, making it public. Just keep in mind that when you do make a document public, it can't have any contact info on it.
I want to pause just for a moment and
Sure.
just ask if anybody has any questions before we move on to this next section. If you do, please go ahead and unmute yourself or type it into the chat window. Otherwise, we will continue on. All right. Oh,
if we have, I don't know if you can hear me.
yes.
If we have a listing that has, a lake access, deeded lake access, but it's not actually waterfront, can we include a picture on the MLS that is labeled access point for the lot of the water?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yes, if you have a property that has deeded access but not actual frontage, you can include a photo of the lake from the deeded access. And you actually aren't required to disclose that on the picture, but it wouldn't hurt.
Okay, thank you.
There is a question in the chat window from Terry Monroe. Good morning, Terry.
Oh yeah, okay.
I assume you cannot put a company logo on any document also?
Yeah, correct. Yep, you're right, Terry. No company logos on public documents. So if it's a private document, that's fine because that's only visible to other South Central Wisconsin MLS agents. But if it's a public document, then correct, it should not have any kind of logos or contact information. Yeah, great question. All right, so
Cool. Yeah, you can go ahead.
Okay, yeah, so we'll keep on trucking here. All right, so there are certain types of properties that we allow to be marketed in more than one category in the MLS. One property type are standalone or half duplex type condominiums. So these would be legally classified as condos. So there's a condo declaration, condominium documents, but they only have 1 or 2 units in the building. So it's either a standalone home or it's a half duplex where it has like the one shared wall in between the units. If you have a condo that meets those criteria, then you can also market it secondarily under the single family category. You'll need to enter it as a condo first, but then can put it in single family as well. There are a couple of requirements when you enter it in the single family category. If there are any condo fees, you just have to note those in the first line of the public remarks. And there's a type feature of condo that needs to be selected. Another cross-class type of property are single family homes. So these are those that are legally classified as single family, not condominiums, but that have a shared wall or a monthly maintenance fee. These types of homes would be primarily marketed under single family, but you can secondarily market them under the condo category as well. There is, again, a type feature that needs to be selected, and it's called not a condo single family, just disclosing that even though it's in the condo category, it's really legally classified as single family. Multifamily dwellings that were once single family homes. So see a lot of these in like downtown Madison by the campus area. They were maybe once a large single family home, and they've been kind of compartmentalized into 2 or more separate units within one structure. If that's the case, and the property can be converted back to one single family unit, you can market it under both the single family category and the multifamily category. The requirement when you're entering it under the single family category is you just need to mention in the remarks how, what would need to be done in order to convert it back to single family use. So, you know, sometimes you'll see where an interior stairway between the first floor and the second floor was closed off to separate the units. You would just basically have to say, you know, door would need to be opened, an interior stairwell to have like an upper and lower single family home, something along those lines. Lots and acreage, the lots and acreage category is limited to just vacant land. Although if you have a property where there is a residential structure, like a home that has little or no value, you can also enter it under the lots and acreage category in addition to single family. You would just need to make sure you select under the improvements feature category, the feature called residential structure with little or no value. So if you do enter a listing in more than one category, the list date does need to be the same. So if you, let's say you have a condo that you entered in the condo category within your 1 business day time frame, and it's a standalone unit, so you also want to enter it as single family, but maybe now you're past that 4-day limit that the system will allow you to go back when you're entering the list date. You can just enter whatever date you're entering it as the list date, and then just contact MLS staff and ask us to backdate it to the actual list date so they match up. The duplicate listing in the secondary category will be deleted when the property sells or expires, so the sales stats aren't doubled up. So some other specific situations. New construction, there are 3 type feature options to help you identify where within the process the property is. The first stage is when it's just a building plan with lots. So if you have a building plan that a builder is planning on building on a specific lot, the lot does need to be included in order to put that building plan on the MLS. So this feature indicates that construction has not yet begun, and only 1 building plan per lot can be entered. So if the builder says, you know, yeah, I'm willing to build a you know, 3-bedroom, 2-bath ranch home on this lot for $300,000, but we have other building plans available that we consider. You can just enter the one representative listing, and then feel free to note in either the remarks or as an associated document what other building plans may be available. If a building plan with lot listing expires before construction actually starts on it, those are deleted because they never really existed. Properties that are under construction. So this would be the next stage once construction has started. So as soon as the hole has been dug, we want to update the type feature to under construction to reflect that. And at this point, the estimated date of completion or the stage of completion at the time you listed it does need to be included in the first line of the public remarks, just so everybody's kind of aware of approximately where things are at with the construction. And if this changes at all throughout the course of the listing, if you can keep that updated as far as, you know, the anticipated completion date, that's really helpful. Once construction is complete, you can update the feature to new, never occupied to reflect that. And because construction's finished now, a front exterior photo is required at that point. Properties that are marked with the has actual water frontage feature, they need to be located on a lake, a river, or a channel. So basically a navigable body of water. If you have a property that's on, maybe it's got a pond or a like a creek or a stream running through it, there is a feature you can use to reflect that, but you just can't have that has actual water frontage feature selected.
Hey, Heather, I have a question.
Yeah.
From Terry. After a property sells,
Oh, yeah.
if it gets, you can read it, right?
Yeah, yep, okay. So after a property sells, and if it gets listed down the road, can you still clone the listing? Is duplicate the same as clone? Good question. Okay, so if a property sells, let's say you had it listed before and it sells, and then maybe the buyer contacted you to relist it again. You can clone the listing as long as it was one of your listings previously. If a different company had it listed, you won't be able to do a copy clone on the listing. So that's a different, copy clone is different than a duplicate listing when we're talking about entering it in more than one category. One question we get often is, okay, so you've entered the property as a condo and now you want to enter it as single family. Can you do a copy clone between categories? Unfortunately not. The system only allows you to copy clone between the same category. So you could do condo to condo, you could do single family to single family, but not condo to single family. All right, thanks, Terry. Okay, so bedrooms. So the MLS does not have a definition for bedrooms. If it's atypical, for example, maybe the room doesn't have a closet, just be sure to explain that in the remarks so a buyer realizes that before they set up a showing and get to the property. With that being said, if a bedroom does not meet safety guidelines, it can't be called a bedroom in the MLS. And this is something that you'll want to verify with the local municipality, usually like the building inspector. They should be able to help you understand what the requirements are for that particular locality as far as safety standards for calling a room a bedroom, particularly if it's in the lower level of a home. Oftentimes, if the assessor record is one where they list out more of the property detail, you can get that information right from the assessor record as far as how many rooms they're considering to be bedrooms. But if it's not on the assessor record and you're really not sure, just reach out to the municipality or another third party to kind of confirm what those requirements are. If it is a bedroom that's in the lower level, it will have to have egress, and we do require a photo be added to the MLS that shows that egress for every lower level bedroom. We've got a link here too that has a resource. Let's see if I can click on it without closing my presentation. So this has some information, guidelines from the Department of Safety and Professional Services that talks about some things to consider when you're calling a lower level room a bedroom. So it goes over exits, the windows, the size, how high they can be off the floor, ceiling height, and some other things to consider. So this is just a resource that we like to link to just to give you a little bit more guidance on that. But we do recommend, if you're not sure, consult with the appropriate third parties and check local ordinances, check with the municipality just to be sure all the necessary requirements are met. All right, so when you list a property on the MLS, where does it go? So all properties that are entered in the South Central Wisconsin MLS automatically go over to Wirex. Now Wirex is the statewide data share with 7 Wisconsin MLSs. And I've got a map here so you can kind of get an idea of, where within the state participates. And let me just try and make this a little smaller so you can see. Okay, so basically there are 9 MLSs throughout the state of Wisconsin. 7 of those 9 participate and send their listings to the Wirex data share. So all of the counties that are shaded in dark blue here are the ones where you can find listings in Wirex. The only 2 MLSs that don't participate are the Door County MLS and the Greater Northwoods MLS. So you likely won't find listings in these counties that are lighter in Wirex, but pretty much everywhere else in the state you should be able to find these. So if you have, if you have a buyer looking in our service area, South Central Wisconsin area, you can do that search right within our main MLS. But if you're looking for properties over in maybe the Milwaukee area or up north, switch over to Wirex and you'll be able to find those. Within every listing on the listing input screen is a field called Internet IDX. And you've got a few options for that: yes, no, and X, which stands for yes, but no address. Now you'll notice that this field will default to yes when you enter a new listing, because this is the field that controls whether the listing is sent out to all of the public websites that receive a feed from the MLS. So it'll default to yes, but if you ever have a situation where maybe a seller doesn't want their listing out on all the public websites, you can change that to no, and it will only show up then in the South Central Wisconsin MLS and Wirex. Just a little bigger here. All right, it looks like we got another question here. Terry, okay. Do you think Door County MLS and Northern MLS will join Wirex at some point? That's a really good question. So Door County MLS actually did used to belong to Wirex. That was maybe up until about 2 years ago, I want to say. I know their MLS vendor, so our MLS vendor is Paragon. They have a different MLS vendor, and my understanding was their MLS vendor, although they were sending data to Wirex, they were having a really hard time getting all of the rest of the state data back into their database. So they weren't really getting the benefit from Wirex that we were. So my understanding is that's why they opted out. Greater Northwoods MLS that covers kind of the Oneida and Vilas County area, that's actually where I'm originally from, is Rhinelander, and I actually used to belong to that MLS before I moved to Madison. I don't know. I know there's a lot of agents up in that area who really would like to participate, but I don't think their board has been open to the idea of joining. So I don't know. I know some of the agents in that area have actually joined South Central Wisconsin MLS just for that reason, to get their listings onto Wirex. So they're actually paying double MLS dues for that. But it's just a small fraction right now. So I think it's probably going to be dependent on whether they can get more of a majority of agents seeing the benefit in that. Yeah, good question. You're welcome. So other places that your listings will automatically go by default include the websites wisconsinhomes.com, HomeSnap, and realtor.com. Those are kind of the big ones. And then there are also several hundred office and agent IDX websites that automatically get a feed from our MLS. That happens by default too. So you're getting a lot of exposure on outside sites just by putting your listing on the MLS. Zillow and Trulia, those sites, your office opts in. So your office broker would opt in as a whole to have all of your office listings sent to those two sites. If they don't opt in, then your listings are not automatically sent to those sites. Now, if your broker is one of them who has opted in and has all your listings going there, and you have a seller who doesn't want their listing to appear on those two sites, you can opt that listing out. There's a field within the listing input screen that is basically just a Zillow opt-out. So that is possible to do. And then there's also a service available to our members called List Hub. And there's a list here of all the different channels, AKA websites, that List Hub publishes to. So there's quite a few. I think last I checked, there were maybe around 80 or 90. So this is a kind of a listing of all the different sites that that network goes to. So if that's something you're interested in, there's some information on our website, which I'll point out at the end of the presentation, that you can go to see about getting signed up for that. One kind of neat feature within Paragon is called the Listing Activity Report. And I'm going to log in just so I can show you how to access that, because it's kind of a handy tool to watch the activity level on your listing. Give me just a minute here. My computer seems to be a little slow when I'm jumping back and forth between the presentation and Paragon. So you can access the Listing Activity Report a few different ways. I find it easiest to go up to Listings, and then under Maintain, you can click on Listings. Now what this will do is it'll bring up all of your currently active listings. So you'll be able to see all of your listings right here. Because I'm MLS staff, I obviously don't have any of my own listings. So I'm just going to take a look at all listings, and I'm just going to pull up a random one here. So when you click on the MLS number, it'll bring up the listing input screen. And over here on the left-hand side is a little link where you can view the activity report. And what this activity report will show you is kind of a snapshot of the exposure that your property is getting from within Paragon. So it'll show you things like how many saved searches your property has matched with, how many contacts it's matched with, how many times it's been viewed, how many people have saved it as a favorite or a possible within Collab Center, how many times it's been emailed from the system, and the number of hits. It identifies it by agent and client, and then unique agent and unique client. So, you know, if one agent clicks on the property 10 times, it'll show up under the total number of agent hits, but unique agent hits will only reflect one view per agent. And let's see, Terry, love to get a copy of all the websites our listings get syndicated to. Yeah, so I can definitely send some information out on that. Maybe Rick can include it when he sends out the email after the presentation. Because the websites are changing, we don't have like a set list of all the different sites, but I can give you a pretty good idea at least of all the different places that the listing goes. Yeah. So that's kind of the gist of the listing activity report. It's just kind of a helpful little tool where you can see the activity on your property. You do have the ability to email, so you can email it to your seller from here. You can print it right from that screen. All right, so for listing changes, I just want to talk a little bit about timelines and what should happen in the system. So when you have a price change, you have 3 days to report that in the MLS. An email notification is sent out to any buyers through the auto email notifications or Collab Center if the price change is at least 0.5%. And you'll also see that red or green up or down arrow appear on the spreadsheet to identify any price changes, and that stays for 2 weeks. If you have an extension, again, you have 3 days to report that. And then when a property expires or is moved to withdrawn by seller, I want to talk a little bit about the difference between those two statuses. So expired reflects that your listing contract is no longer in effect. So you've either reached the end of the term of your original contract, or you've done an amendment to expire it out early. If that's the case, then you'll want to update the status to expired to reflect that. If it's just kind of the natural end of your contract, the system will automatically expire those out as of the expiration date. Withdrawn by seller status, now that reflects that your listing contract actually is still in place. So it's not been expired, your contract is still in effect, but the seller has requested they don't want any more marketing or showings for the duration of the contract. So in that case, you would actually move it to withdrawn by seller. Once you go to withdrawn by seller status, you can't move it back to active. So what you would need to do if your seller kind of changes their mind or decides, oh, actually, we do want to go back on the market, you would expire out your current listing contract and MLS number, and then you'd sign a new contract, and you'd be able to then put it on as a brand new MLS number. If showings are only temporarily suspended, maybe the seller's having some work done or had a tree fall on the roof or something like that, and they don't want to allow showings during that time period, the status should actually remain active, and you can just put a note in the first line of the public remarks that says when showings are expected to resume. So to relist a property, you do need a new listing contract if you want to enter it with a new MLS number. If we are notified that a new contract was not signed, there could be a $50 fine if the new MLS number was entered without a new contract. And if you are ever in a situation where you're not sure about a rule or something, just give us a call or send us an email. We're always happy to chat through it and talk about what the options are, rather than, if you just do it and then realize it was wrong. We always like to try to help our members on the front end to make sure, we make it as easy as possible for you and the rules are all followed. When you relist a property, there's two different days on market trackers. The regular days on market just looks at that listing, that one MLS number. There's also cumulative days on market, which you'll see noted as CDOM on the data sheets. So when you relist a property with a new MLS number, your days on market count will automatically reset. The cumulative days on market looks at the listings that have been in some kind of active status within the last 31 days. So if you want that cumulative days on market count to reset as well, you'll want to make sure that the listing's been off the market for 31 full days before you relist it. So you don't want to count the previous expiration date or the new list date. Make sure there's 31 days in between, and then your days on market will reset. All right, so accepted offers. Again, 3 days to report from the date that it's accepted. If you don't get it reported within that 3-day window, there is a potential for a $5 per day fine if it's reported late. We do cap it at $100 maximum. And one thing, one other potential fine we have for this is if the AO data is falsified to try and get around the fine, there's actually another fine that could apply. So just make sure you're getting them reported within the 3 days and you'll be perfectly fine. Status options for accepted offers. Offer show, and this means that there is an accepted offer, but the seller is still interested in continuing to show the property and look at secondary offers. And just remember the correction button. If you go to set up a showing on a listing that's in offer show status and you're denied because the seller says, well, it's under contract now, so we're not allowing any more showings, use that correction button and let us know, because the status really should be changed to offer no show if they're not allowing any further showings. Now, if it's just a matter of like a time conflict and they say, well, we're not going to do any showings on this day, but we'll do showings on this day, that wouldn't really apply. They could still have it as offer show, but if they're saying no more showings because of the offer, then offer no show would be the status to reflect that. And you can use offer no show status even if there are still contingencies. We're not really looking at the contingencies, the status of those. We're only looking at whether the seller is still looking or interested in showing it and considering secondary offers. One other option, if there's a bump clause, is offer bump status. And this should only be used if there is a bump clause in the offer. you actually have a second option if there's a bump clause, or in cases where it's a short sale, where you can actually leave the status as active as long as you don't accepted offer bump or accepted offer short sale in the first words of the broker remarks. So you've got a little more flexibility to decide how you want to market it if it's a bump clause or a short sale situation. But those are the only two scenarios where you'd be able to do that without having to change it to offer show or offer no show. All right, so when your property sells, you have 10 days from closing to report the sale. Again, there's a $5 per day fine if it's reported after day 10. We cap that at $25. And again, there's that $100 fine if the closing date is falsified to avoid a fine. When a property is no longer available for showing, so let's say maybe originally, right after the offer was accepted, the seller said, yeah, I still want to allow showings until we know for sure that this is, going to close. So they put it in offer show. And then at some point the seller says, yeah, okay, now we're pretty comfortable with this and we don't want to allow any more showings. Just be sure to move the status to offer no show within 3 days of when showings are no longer allowed. Particularly, the thing we don't want to see is a property staying in offer show status right up until it closes, because unless the deal is that shaky where the seller is still interested in allowing showings the day before closing, the status really should be moved to offer no show before that point. And when you're reporting the sale agent, there are some teams that work in the MLS, and your obligation as a listing agent is if there is a team record in the MLS, meaning the team has registered as a team and is paying additional dues to be shown as a team in the MLS, then you do need to report the sale under the team name. If they're not registered as a team, if they're just shown as an individual agent in the MLS, you have the option of reporting the sales side as either the team lead or the team member that you worked with. It's your call at that point. And that's pretty much all I have. So I've got a few more resources at the end here. You can always give us a call. That's our main number to our office. And if you hit 1, you'll get either Kelly, myself, or Patty for listing questions. Our email address is listings@wisri.com. We also have our member information website, which I'm just going to click out to here, scwmls.com. We post kind of all of our latest news on this main page here. And on the left-hand side, we've got the listing info tab, which covers pretty much everything that I went over today. We've got a quick links menu on the right that is in alphabetical order by topic. So let's say, I can't remember what she said about condo listings. If you click on that section, you'll see, everything that has to do with condos in that area. So that's just a resource I like to point out. Although we always love getting calls and emails from members and chatting through especially unique scenarios too, to make sure we're all on the same page. We also have a link here to past Paragon Hot Tips. This is another good resource. All of the hot tips that appear on the Paragon homepage are actually archived here. So let's say you're looking for information on delayed status. If you do Control F, like for find on your keyboard, it'll bring up this little search window here, and you can type in whatever search term you want to look for, and it'll tell you all of the instances of that particular term and where it shows up in the page. So you can kind of click through and see all the different places that that's been talked about. And then this is a list of all of our MLS staff. I'm Heather. Dave is our Paragon Support and Training Manager. Kelly, she works closely with me to handle data integrity, make sure the database is accurate and useful for all of you. Gretchen is our Supra Key Administrator. Joy handles billing and MLS accounts. And then Patty is our fearless leader, our MLS Director. So that's all I have. So at this point, I will open it up to any questions that you guys have.
Do have one question there from Terry regarding where to go. That I believe is on the SCW MLS website, correct?
Yeah, and actually I can show you that here. Let me just pull that site back up. Okay, so if you go out to scwmls.com, you get to the main page. We've got a link over here for Internet IDX List Hub. And if you click on that, it'll talk about what websites my listings appear on. And this is actually what I was going to direct you to when you had asked that question earlier, Terry. So you can see the different sites it goes out to, company sites, Zillow and Trulia. And then we talk here about the List Hub partner websites. So this is where you can see the List Hub website channels. That was what we had looked at before to get to all those different channels that we had seen. Was that what you were looking for? Okay, perfect. All right. Other questions? And I'm sorry if it's loud. I'm just going to shut my window here. I think I've got a jet flying over, so hopefully you can still hear me okay.
Yeah, sounds fine.
Okay.
Don't see any other questions coming in. And of course, you provided the email address. You guys all know how to get a hold of me, or just get a hold of the office at 608-240-2800. And the menu will get you directed to where you need to go. I just want to take a minute here to thank Heather for her time today. Great job, Heather. I really appreciate it. I also want to thank Josie and the rest of the committee from Sauk, Columbia for putting this together. I always enjoy bringing you guys whatever we can. If you have suggestions moving forward about classes that you would like, things that you want to be educated on, anything like that, please reach out to your committee or reach out to myself personally, and we would be happy to come up and provide whatever we can for you. So thank you all very much. And if you have questions, please feel free to reach out. I will be sending you all an email follow-up probably sometime this afternoon with this presentation, so that you'll have all these links and this information for reference. So with that, I think we will call it a day. Everyone have a wonderful week, and we'll talk and see you soon, hopefully. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone.